Massimo, the floor is yours. And thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm particularly honored and glad because I'm part now, as a speaker at least, of this wonderful project that has been devised by Enzo D'Armenio and with the participation of Maria Giulia Dondero, which is IMACTIS. I must say that it's very difficult to find in present-day visual semiotics people who really try to do something new. You come across a lot of repetition, analysis that repeat old schemes without really adding something new. And I take the opportunity of this event to say that in semiotics you either like add a genius to some analysis with old methods. That's not always the case with semiotic analysis that you read around, or you must invent new ways of carry on your investigations. Because otherwise, what we do, what we see around, it doesn't really make too much sense. It sounds like a repeated disc that it's starting to sound like a broken disc. So I really thank Maria Giulia for being so courageous, actually, because it's not easy to try to introduce some novelty within a method that is very established. And so I can imagine the difficulties that she has been facing and she's facing. But this is the direction to take. That for our younger researchers, this is the way to do things. To explore new frontiers. This is also the way to serve semiotics well. To replace and resituate semiotics and visual semiotics among the disciplines that are considered deign of talking to the world about what images have to say, and so it's very important to stress that. And I'm really glad that I'm sharing this platform with Harald Klinke, because we haven't met in person too many times, but he's part of the advisory board of the project ERC that I lead, Facets, so he's also Maria Giulia. But also I remember that we met in person several years ago. It was before that I would apply for this ERC, and he was invited at this beautiful villa together with me at the Lake Como. It was an event organized by myself together with Martina Corniati and Luca Volli. And there were students from the Brera Academy, and Harald Klinke was there, and he presented these, absolutely new for everybody methods for studying art history. And I remember that at that time I was a little bit skeptical, but then I must say that reading his articles and his journals, he has gained my heart. So I really believe that that's also the way to explore, to say something new in art history. So sorry for the long introduction, but just to place the meaning of this event. You're probably already familiar with the project Facets. I've decided to give a provocative title to this presentation, the title Digital Square, Teaching Visual Semiotics to Artificial Intelligence. The digital square is, of course, a reference to the semiotic square, but it's also a reference to the fact that we now more and more live in a digital agora. So it's a square in which we live as individuals that interact in the cyberspace, in the online world, in the digital world. But at the same time, this square is the name of the most famous tool of Grimmesian semiotics. So the question is, can we combine artificial intelligence and Grimmesian semiotics, Grimmesian semiotics as applied to visual images, for instance? And I would like to answer yes, although I must say that I'm really at the beginning of this process. But this is really the direction in which, toward which I would like to go in my future studies, not only in relation to semiotics and Grimmesian semiotics in particular, but about research in general. I think that we cannot really ignore the enormous power of artificial intelligence, and we must appropriate it. We must bend it towards our means as scholars in social sciences and humanities. And there is a lot of resistance toward that because we come from a field that can be a little bit conservative, just to say little. Maybe I should say very conservative, and so if you start merging these two fields, artificial intelligence and scholarship in humanities, so scholarship in social sciences, you're going to come across a lot of resistance, and some of this resistance is legitimate because. Of course, there are many limits in artificial intelligence and the way it is developed, and the tasks it can accomplish, and particular biases that it can absorb in being programmed and implemented. And that is a good resistance because facing that resistance, we shall actually improve the way in which we use these methods for social sciences and humanities. But then there is also bad resistance. The bad resistance is that of people who use very old arguments like, artificial intelligence is biased, artificial intelligence, in order to convey a sort of very old-fashioned conservatism. And basically, it is a resistance towards something that is ignored. And I think that is something we should avoid. We shouldn't be afraid of what we ignore. We should know first, and then understand the limits of this new field, this new method. But I would encourage everyone, especially our young researchers, to be very suspicious of people who reject like new methods and new tools without actually knowing them. That is how very old schools of theology have worked for centuries in order to protect the status of such or such leader. So. On the contrary, we should venture towards the new, and as I try to demonstrate through this very brief presentation, it will be more and more important to work in teams and to ask for help and seek cooperation from other researchers and scholars. So this is Facets. These are my wonderful collaborators at the University of Turin. The acronym Facets means Face Aesthetics in Contemporary E-Technological Societies. It is a project financed by the European Union, by the European Research Council. Maybe you know some of these faces. The group has been constantly growing in the last years. I wouldn't say that now we are the maximum capacity because I'm really ambitious. So I constantly want to hire new people. So as soon as I have resources, I tend to expand this group because I feel that the interaction within the group is very good. And like each one of these faces corresponds to a different series of skills and competencies, which are very various. So, and the face is a very complex object to study, and as a consequence, all these competencies are needed. But my dream would be to have a even more diversified team, containing not only semioticians, philosophers of language, lawyers, engineers, but also people working in other fields, biology, for instance, natural sciences. Because I think this is a true vocation of semiotics that we should recover as well, not to be afraid of interacting face to face with other disciplines. And this is something that should be done, I think. So this is the project description. It is the project description that has been prepared by the European Union. It's available in different languages, from time to time they add a new language now. I've seen that. I was pleased to see that there is a Polish description, Polish translation. But it is branded, this project is branded by ERC as Innovative Cross-Disciplinary Face Perception Study. This is the identity card of the project, the grant agreement. The starting date is 1st of June 2019. The end date will be 30th of November 2024. When Maria Giulia said 2044, I felt so tired because and also because it's a wonderful adventure, but at the same time, I must say that I'll be very happy when it's completed. And the overall budget is a little bit short of 2 million euros, and it's hosted by University of Turin. So this is the description that is for the wider audience. So selfies are posted on social media networks and masks are donned by anti-establishment activists like Anonymous. Photorealistic 3D printed face prosthetics also exist that can trick facial recognition software and conceal the wearer's identity. These are examples of how facial aesthetics are evolving as an important influence on social behavior. The EU-funded Facets project will combine visual history, semiotics, phenomenology, visual anthropology, and face perception studies as regards the cognitions, emotions, and actions people attach to the interaction with one's and others' faces. The project will review the effects in terms of alterations in self-perception. It will also collect, analyze, and socially contextualize big data to identify the cultural and technological causes of these changes. So I would like you to focus on the first sentence. It will also collect, analyze, and socially contextualize big data to identify the cultural and technological causes of these changes. So this is a sentence that has kept me sleepless for many nights, I would say months or even years, because this is exactly what I promised to the European Research Council. This was probably the most innovative part of my research project, which I think wasn't funded because of the presence of semiotics. Semiotics, of course, is a wonderful discipline, but I doubt they would have given me this funding of 2 million euros just to carry on some semiotic analysis, because for the simple fact that they don't usually entail any infrastructural costs. But this sentence kept me sleepless because for months, if not years, I would say, I thought that I would be never able to live up with this promise. So I thought that actually that was just a promise that was stealing European Research Council's money to do some conventional semiotics. And not because I didn't want to carry on this sentence into a concrete project, but because I realized that it was so difficult. It was very difficult. Why was it difficult? Because first of all, I didn't have the experience to work on big data and to carry on quantitative analysis. All my career beforehand, before this ERC project, had been about qualitative analysis. But I must say that while I was doing qualitative analysis, I was analyzing texts relating religious conversion or paintings representing sanctity, or the other texts that really took my attention and was really very interesting to me. All the time, I was asking myself a question that probably, I don't know if it's legitimate in semiotics, but I must be honest, I was constantly asking this question to myself. And the question was, is this corpus representative? Am I really investigating, or I'm just confirming my hypothesis by choosing the text that better suit my initial hypothesis? So is there a resistance of the corpus vis-a-vis my methodology? Or there is something circular in my proceedings. And even then, at that time, I was dreaming of introducing a perspective that would combine the qualitative approach of semiotics with the possibility of enlarging the corpus of analysis so that it would become more and more representative. And that was not so crucial when I would study, let's say, microcultural contexts, like, I don't know, the circulation of religious texts in the 17th century. But when I started working on contemporary issues, because I also focused on religious fundamentalism, for instance, I thought to myself, but, is it enough to study one Islamist website? I shouldn't carry on an extensive analysis to all Islamist websites to say something more solid about what is happening in this, discursive arena. And so that was the initial idea of Facets, to harvest big data, visual big data from the internet, and in particular from social networks, and to carry on this analysis with different means. So the first idea that I had was to use Amazon Turks. And I even gave a presentation some years ago at a Congress of the Italian Association for Semiotic Studies. I remember the reaction, like, this is not a topic that you want to present to the International Association, the Italian Association for Semiotic Studies. Just the word Amazon would be rejected. But the idea was to use Amazon Turks. What are Amazon Turks? Amazon Turks is a market for distributed cognitive skills. So if you have a research task that requires the activity of many researchers, if you, for instance, want to analyze like 1,000 images, 1 million images, you cannot do it on your own, and you cannot do it with your own team as well. My team is now like 15 researchers, so like it would be too little to analyze, 10,000 images. So one method would be to distribute the corpus among these anonymous workers that are handled by Amazon in like markets that Amazon owns, but there are also alternatives to Amazon, so it's not the only one. And basically, you distribute these images, and then you ask Turks to accomplish very simple tasks on these images. So you ask very simple questions, but at the same time, these questions would be too complicated to deal with by machines. Or at least that was the case when I wrote the project. I wrote the project in 2018. So it's already like almost 3-4 years ago. And at that time, I thought that for some simple tasks, like identifying the type of face that was in an image, in a digital image, I couldn't ask a machine. I should actually ask human beings. And at the same time, if I wanted to keep this quantitative dimension in the project, it was impossible to work with a small team in Turin. I had to rely to what I called a semi-automated method. So distribute these images to Turks and then receive their feedback. That was impossible, unfortunately. This talk is also a way to say to young researchers that these projects always come across obstacles, and some of these obstacles cannot be actually overcome. So the only way is to change the direction of the project. I had to change the direction of the project because I couldn't hire these Turks for legal reasons, because these Turks were handled by a US company, Amazon. Whatever project is financed by the European Research Council must rely to resources that are external to European Union to the minimum, because otherwise ERC goes into a lot of administrative and legal trouble. So this was one problem. The second problem was that the project deals with images of faces of people, existing people. So you cannot actually send these images out to Turks whose identity and even like civic and legal status you don't perfectly know. So you cannot know, for instance, whether these people who are handled by Amazon are obliged to adhere with the European legal framework when they analyze images. So they might use these images, for instance, for purposes that are different from those for which they were hired. They could, for instance, take these images and use these images to do a back research on Google Image or with other tools in order to know something about the identity of the people who are represented in these images. Or they could use these facial images in order to build some artificial identities, some bots, some visual bots, which is more and more the case in the contemporary world. So this was not an issue. This was simply a final stop. It was an idea that I had when I wrote the project, but it couldn't actually be implemented, mainly for administrative and legal reasons. The other problem was that I was working at the University of Turin, and when the European Union gave me these 2 million euros, I thought the University of Turin would do everything to suit my needs as a researcher and give me all the resources I needed in order to carry on this project. Well, unfortunately, that was not the case. And one problem was the infrastructure. So there wasn't adequate infrastructure at the University of Turin in order to carry on this project. You see, this was the initial objective of the project: facet status, the meaning of the face in contemporary visual cultures. There are two complementary research foci: widespread practices of face exhibition in social networks like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Tinder, and minority practices of occultation, including the mask in anti-establishment political activism and in anti-surveillance artistic provocation, and blah, blah, blah. And here, too, I was promising to carry on some quantitative analysis of big data. So basically, there was a whole part of the project that I couldn't carry on because of the legal restrictions of the European Research Council and because of the lack of adequate infrastructure at the University of Turin. And then after 2 years of trouble, of thinking and rethinking how to come out of this situation, 2 years seems a lot of time, but for a project of this kind, it's not a long time at all, because dealing with the European Union and the European Research Council sometimes takes ages. I came across these two wonderful people, Professor Liamora and Professor Fabrizio Lamberti from Turin's Polytechnical University. So there was a moment in the project where I thought, okay, I'm going to move the project somewhere else at a university where they actually have infrastructure to carry on this project. I'm going to move the project to Liège, to FNRS. But then all of a sudden I thought, well, but come on, I mean, Turin is the place where there is probably the best polytechnical school in Italy, where the top engineers in Italy are trained. So why don't we ask them if they can help? And through a collaborator of mine that I won't thank enough ever, his name is Antonio Sant'Angelo, I got in contact with these two professors who are professors in the Department of Automation at the university, at the Turin Polytechnical University. Now, this was not easy either, because we had to find people who could help us. But of course, our project and our, let's say, goal was not a goal for engineering and for people usually work on very specific projects. But then I went through the CVs of many people working at the Turin Polytechnical University, and I realized that these two people were working for actually Fiat, which is the most important car manufacturer in Italy. And they were working on a very specific project that was implementing artificial intelligence on cars and other devices related to with automobile industry that would detect when the road is wet. Now, that seems a very simple task. So understanding if the road is wet or is dry, I mean, for us human beings is something incredibly easy to do. But it is very difficult to teach artificial intelligence, especially in conditions of dim light, especially in conditions of artificial light, to understand whether a surface is wet or not and how much it has rained. this is one of the problems that are dealt with by the people who work with artificial intelligence applied to the automobile. So I thought, wow, maybe these people can actually help me to analyze other kinds of images, and not images of wet roads, but images of faces. And so I asked them, and they were very enthusiastic. They thought that it could be stimulating for them. Technically, we created a secondary beneficiary, so we moved some of the money to Turin's Polytechnical University, and they started working on the project. And that was the beginning of Fresco, which is a branch of Facets. Fresco is another acronym. I'm a specialist in acronyms, so if one day you want an acronym, please ask me, because I'm like creating acronyms every day. Acronyms are very important for European projects. They're more important than the project itself. So Fresco means face representations in e-societies through computational observation. And I chose this acronym because it is both an Italian and an English word. In Italian, it means fresh, but in English, it means what in Italian is an affresco. So it's a way of painting. And so I liked this idea of combining something refreshing, like applying artificial intelligence to visual images in social networks, and something that would give us a fresco, a global picture of how people use facial images in social networks. And so Fresco became the quantitative line of research of Facets in cooperation with Professors Liège and Fabrizio Lamberti and their team. It's a wonderful team of PhD students at the Polytechnical University of Turin, and concentrates on 3 data sets in order of priority, depending on resources available. Why depending on resources available? Because these kinds of research are actually costly. So you must limit your goals in order to take the most advantage from the infrastructure that you have. So first, digital images used as account profile pictures in social networks, Facebook and Instagram. As you see, we eliminated Tinder because there was no way to work on Tinder and at the same time respecting the legal rules and legal framework of the GDPR and European Research Council. And 2, pre-digital images of faces from art and visual history. And this is how Facets might actually join at some stage Harald Klinke's line of research. And 3rd, artificial facial images generated by GAN, generative adversarial networks. Is something a little bit more complicated, but we won't have time to talk about it today. We concentrated on the first line of research. So Fresco's Facets priority is to study data sets of social network profile pictures in order to understand how users represent their identity in the digital world, often through images of the faces, but sometimes also through replacing them with other kinds of images presented as faces, so landscapes, VIPs, political symbols, etc. We shall see that that constitutes a problem in the implementation of the project, because not everyone on Facebook uses his or her own face as a profile face. Some people use symbols, some people use faces of VIPs, some people use monuments, and some people use faces of other people who are private citizens. This is illegal. It would be illegal in Facebook, but the consequence is that it would be illegal for us to study that picture. So Facets does not work with previous data sets, but ambitions to build its own throughout the methodology explained in this presentation. Within the Facets collection, profile images are linked to socio-demographic information such as age, gender, nationality, and so forth. So it is important to stress that building a new data set of visual images is a very important ambition for people working in this field, in the field of artificial intelligence applied to images. For us, conventional semioticians, the most important thing is to publish a paper, for instance, or to publish a book. But for my colleagues, the engineers, Professor Lamberti and Professor Mora, well, they don't really care too much about publishing a new paper or publishing a new book. What they want to publish is a new data set. So it's a set of data, in this case visual data, that then other 1,000 scholars will use as a reference, citing and quoting this data set in their papers or in their books. So this is much more important to have your H-index grow, in the scientific world than having a paper or having a book published. So it's a new way of addressing also the academic work. So I completely lost any idea of how much I should talk because I'm so passionate. So it was 30 minutes?
35, but you can go further.
Okay, I just give a glimpse of how it works.
10 minutes more maximum.
10 minutes, okay. So how does Fresco work? The quantitative analysis of large-scale data moves beyond the pictorial analysis of individual faces to build a dynamic picture in which facial icon types can be seen in their evolution and mutual interaction with historical events and socio-cultural trends. In addition, the collection of socio-demographic information allows to assess the representativeness of the collection and enables the creation of representative and balanced samples through sampling strategies. The collected images are processed using a combination of existing software tools as well as new artificial intelligence components developed ad hoc during the project. An overview of the process is provided in this picture. So there is data collection first, then there is data cleaning, because not all the data that are collected can be used for the analysis. Then there is data storage, which is important because we have to secure that all images are secure, are safe, and are anonymized. So we don't want anyone to access this data set of facial images. Just remember, please, that the face is one of our treasures in the present-day economy. So it's something to be protected. Then these data that have been collected, cleaned, and stored and anonymized undergo through parallel processes. One process of quantitative morphological analysis that uses existing tools for a facial analysis, and a second process that is more creative, more inventive, that is a process of deep learning that involves new labeling of this annotation of these images, giving rise to a neural network inspection. Results from the quantitative morphological analysis and the neural network inspection are combined in terms of visualization and analytics. So this is a nutshell. This is the system that is used in order to gather facial images from basically social networks. We are working mostly on Facebook, also on Instagram, but for reasons that are a little bit complicated to explain, Facebook is much more easy to deal with in order to harvest these facial images than Instagram. So the user interacts with faces. Sorry, there's something very simple like electricity that sometimes messes things. Okay. So the user interacts with Facets web client, and Facets web client sends data to the identity server, to the identity database. And at the same time, connects the client with the Facets API server that gives rise to both the Facets database, the image server, and transmits data to the identity server. The identity server then is the element through which the user can actually access Facebook through a dedicated login, and a specific API on Facebook is used in order to have the user interact with Facets web client. So I'm going to explain this in very simple terms. What we do is to ask the user who accepts to be, let's say, studied by us through a very complicated series of documents that he or she has to accept, abide with. We ask the user whether he wants to donate some images from the profile that he or she has on Facebook. And then we ask him or her also if she or he wants to donate the entirety of these profile pictures. And this can be automated through a Facebook API, making everything much smoother, let's say much quicker, because basically the user who accepts to do that doesn't have to upload the images in our server, in our system. All the images that are used as profile images on his or her Facebook account are transferred in our dataset. And then these are some of the operations that are carried on through existing algorithms of analysis of digital facial images. So these are algorithms that are basically available on the market, and most of them are available for free. We had to select them also on the basis of like legal restrictions, but some of them are very common: face detection, face key points, face orientation, emotion detection, body pose, object detection, and then also text recognition, color histogram with palette and grayscale, sepia, filters detection, something that is quite elementary in face analysis. The other parallel line, which involves the programming of specific neural networks and deep learning, semi-supervised deep learning for the analysis of these facial images, is much more creative, because we are going to actually tell these neural networks what we are looking for, or something which is even more creative. We're going to let these neural networks find their own regularities in facial images and tell us what kind of patterns they discover. So we're not going to ask them to find any particular patterns and go along some particular lines. We're going to basically let them find their regularities in facial images and then see if these regularities make sense for us too, the humans that look at these images. Now, all this process took an enormous time in terms of dealing with the ethics of ERC, just to demonstrate how difficult it was. I show you the roadmap of all the documents that we had to comply with in order to finally being able to implement this system. And the final authorization came last week. So the project started in June 2019. The final authorization of ERC ethics was transmitted. Yeah, this was downloaded the 22nd of November. So it was really, really recent. It was a struggle, but a struggle through which we also learned a lot about the ethics of digital images. And so this is how the system looks like now. It's not visible to the general public because we are still testing it. So you access a sub-branch of the website of Facets. And in this website, for the moment it's just in Italian, you are connected to your Facebook account, and you see all the images that you have used along the years as profile images on your Facebook account. And you can choose to metterci la faccia. No, metterci la faccia is an Italian expression to see, put your face in it. So you can donate your face to science somehow. And this is what I've done. So these are all the images that I've used as profile pictures in my Facebook account since 2006. 76 images that I've donated to this project. You can see me in different parts of the world. You can see that there are some patterns. Of course, as a semiotician, I see that there are some patterns, but now I would like to see whether neural networks recognize some patterns as well, and how these patterns can be recognized in big data. So, for instance, the presence of architecture, the presence of a certain atmosphere, the presence of a certain kind of weather, the presence of a certain attire, the inclination of the face, the presence of animals, the replacement of the face, my face, with faces of other objects. So for instance, line sculptures, the predominance of certain animals in profile facial images. The fact that until I got married, I was an individual on Facebook, and then I got married and I started to have a dual profile picture. So that was a problem for our system, because we had to make sure that users that who donate their images, donate only the images of their face and not the images of the faces of other people who are in the same picture. So the system now asked me to identify myself and blurs the image of other people who might be with me in the same picture, because I don't have the right to give other faces, other people's faces to this system. So this is really in a nutshell, and I hope that this system will be publicly available soon, and I hope that you'll also be willing to donate your face to science. Although your face is a blank face, although you don't have any image on your Facebook account, that is important for us too, because it is also part of the statistics. So thank you very much for the attention. I'm sorry I was a little bit long.